Hey guys, tonight we're going to ride across the endless grasslands of Central Asia. The stars above you sparkle like a bowl of scattered salt, and under your hands the reins are worn smooth from long use. A wind sighs across the steppe, carrying with it the scent of dry grass, distant fires, and horse sweat. You're bundled in layers of felt and leather, a sheepskin hat pulled low over your ears. Somewhere behind you is a note tucked in a pouch, no bigger than your palm, that might change the fate of an entire kingdom. But you're just trying not to fall asleep in the saddle, because tonight you're not a general or a noble or even a regular traveler. You're a yam rider, one of the thousands of messengers who once galloped across the largest land empire in human history, delivering messages with supernatural speed, icy calm, and an unreasonable amount of horsehair stuck to your clothes. And, just to be clear, you probably wouldn't survive this. The Mongol Empire's postal system, known as the Yam, was no cozy mail route. Riders crossed blizzards, deserts, and enemy territory with almost no supplies and very little sleep. Break your ankle? Ride. Get ambushed by bandits? Ride. Lose your horse? Walk until you find another. The punishment for slacking off or losing, Imperial Messages wasn't a bad performance review. It was, well, is less than ideal. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me your location and the local time. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boots sink into the dewy grass as you mount up. In the moonlight, the horse looks more like a hairy barrel on legs than a noble steed, but Mongol horses aren't built for drama. They're built to survive. Compact, tough, and fast enough to make a falcon nervous. You give a little click with your tongue and off you go. The silence of the steppe isn't really silence. It's full of rustles, low grunts of distant yaks, the occasional howl of a fox and the soft thunder of hooves. And here, surrounded by all that emptiness, you start to understand why the Mongols dominated the 13th century like it was their job, because in a way it was. Historians still argue whether the Mongols truly innovated the idea of a continental postal service, or whether they simply refined and supercharged systems from previous empires, like the Persians and the Chinese. What's certain is that under Genghis Khan and his successors, this system became so fast, so reliable, and so shockingly vast that some letters traveled thousands of kilometers faster than you could boil a pot of rice. But don't get ahead of yourself. You're only about 20 kilometers from your last station, and already your legs are cramping. The saddle is barely padded, and your knees are gripping a horse that really wants to stop and eat grass. Too bad, buddy. We've got history to deliver. As you ride, you start to notice little markers, stone piles with bits of cloth fluttering from them. These are ovus, sacred cairns scattered across the Mongolian landscape. Riders like you often circle them for luck. 1 time, 3 times, depends how risky your route is. Tonight, you nod once and keep going. You're already late. The wind shifts, and now there's a smell, smoke and sweat and meat cooking somewhere ahead. That can only mean one thing. You're nearing a gur, or more specifically a postal relay station. These relay stations, called ertege, were spaced out every 25 to 30 kilometers along major routes. More than 1,000 of them once crisscrossed. The empire like beads on a necklace, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Black Sea. You probably won't see many of your fellow riders. They travel solo to avoid notice. But there's always someone manning the station. A tired administrator, a sleepy cook, a teen with a very enthusiastic goat. You arrive just after midnight, horse steaming and sides heaving. A sleepy man waves you into the enclosure, hands you a bowl of airag, fermented mare's milk, slightly alcoholic, absolutely room temperature, and you dismount, barely able to feel your legs. Bad roads? He asks, as if there were such a thing as a good road. You nod. He nods. That's enough conversation for now. Inside the ger, there's a warm stove, stacks of supplies, and most important of all, fresh horses. Each station keeps several, ready for the next leg. Your worn-out mount is led off to rest, eat, and possibly receive a salt rubdown depending on how fancy this station is. You sit cross-legged on a wool mat and sip the airag. It tastes like someone left yogurt in a barn and then dared you to drink it. You're not sure if it's delicious or offensive, but at least it's wet. Out here, these stations are your lifeline. They're the heartbeats of the Yam system, the quiet rhythm that kept the empire humming. Without them, no emperor could rule from thousands of kilometers away. No army could receive orders in real time. No merchant could trust that his precious silk shipment wasn't going to vanish somewhere in the mountains. But they're not without quirks. Each station has its own vibe, some efficient and military, others more like a sleepover, hosted by deeply exhausted bureaucrats. Rumors float from one to the next. A rider saw a white tiger in the Altai Mountains. A Chinese merchant got stuck in a snowstorm and had to eat his boots. Someone swears the next station over has a goat that sings. You stretch out on a rug, feeling the weight of the ride settle into your bones. Your next mount is already being saddled. You have just enough time for a nap, but not enough to dream. Somewhere outside, a stable hand is singing softly to a horse. The wind moans across the plain. The fire crackles beside you. And for just a moment in this strange outpost of an empire built on speed, silence, and hooves, you sleep. You're awake before the sun, not because of any internal clock, but because someone is shaking your shoulder with all the grace of a hungry marmot. The fire's gone low, the air is sharp with dawn chill, and your knees scream as you rise. A bowl of salty broth appears in your hands, and your host nods toward the door. Horse is ready. That's all you need. The saddle waits, already cinched on a new steed, its ears twitching with the cold. You swing your aching legs over the unfamiliar back and feel the difference instantly. This horse is younger, faster, and, judging by the way it keeps trying to bite the groom, significantly grumpier. You whisper something soothing, hoping your breath smells more like broth than fear, and head off. This, right here, is the Yam. You're riding not just across the Mongol Empire, but with it. The Yam system was the empire's circulatory system, an intricate, sprawling network of riders, horses, stations, and scribes that kept the farthest corners of the realm pulsing with information. It was established by Genghis Khan himself, then refined by his successors, especially his grandson Kublai. Through this system, the emperor could communicate with his generals, governors, tax collectors, and even far-flung vassals in weeks, not months, which sounds cozy until you remember you're the one doing all the riding. Historians still argue whether Genghis modeled the Yam after earlier systems like the Persian Royal Road or the Chinese courier routes, or whether it emerged organically from Mongol nomadic practices. Either way, what set the Yam apart was its scale. At its height, the Yam boasted over 1,400 relay stations and tens of thousands of horses. It connected everything, from Beijing to Baghdad, Karakorum to Kiev, and to fuel it all, horses. So many horses. Each station maintained between 50 and 200 horses, depending on its importance. Some of the major hubs had herds that looked more like chaotic horse conventions, snorting, neighing, stamping across the plains like they owned the place. Which, to be fair, they kind of did. You ride past a caravan moving in the opposite direction, traders hauling silk, spices, and, judging by the smell, a lot of dried fish. They give you a wide berth. Riders like you carried paisa, imperial, passports that made you a bit untouchable. But more on that later. The sun finally breaches the horizon, and with it comes a sea of golden light across the grasslands. Your shadow stretches out like a banner behind you, and for a moment you feel like a character in one of those romantic steppe poems the Persians like to write. Then your horse sneezes and nearly launches you into a marmot hole. Right. No time for poetry. As you gallop onward, you start to notice just how carefully the Yam was constructed. Relay stations weren't chosen at random. They followed natural travel routes, rivers, valleys, ancient trade paths, but they also prioritized speed and reliability. The goal was to keep you moving fast, but not dead. Ideally, You'd ride from one station to the next in a single burst. Switch horses and keep going. On the best days, you could cover up to 200 miles in 24 hours. That's faster than many medieval armies could march in a week. It made the yam invaluable for military strategy. It was also the medieval world's worst work-life balance, and yet somehow it worked. You take a moment to consider the other riders on the road. Most of them were men, young, light, and built for endurance. But records suggest there were women too, especially in regions where local traditions allowed it. One chronicle from Central Asia mentions a female courier who allegedly outran a snowstorm on a borrowed camel, probably an exaggeration. But then again, Mongol stories do tend to blur the line between legend and logistical miracle. You pass another station mid-morning, but don't stop. Just a nod, a quick drink, and you're off again. That's part of the beauty of the yam. It wasn't just a route, it was a lifestyle, a commitment, and occasionally a really bad decision made at full gallop. Quirky side note. Some stations had their own station musicians to keep spirits up. Not official policy, more like one guy who really liked his flute. You remember one back near the Altai who played sad tunes on a jaw harp, swore it made the horses calmer. Did it work? Hard to say, but it certainly made you sleepy. The wind starts to pick up again, cutting across the steppe like a knife made of air. You hunch lower in the saddle, wrapping your deal tighter, and think about the hundreds of riders who passed this way before you. Letters of love, orders for war, tax records, wedding proposals, peace treaties, death sentences, all carried the same way, by people like you riding fast horses through emptiness. The empire may have been ruled by khans and courts, but it moved because of riders. You start to get hungry again. Typical. Your food is tucked into a leather pouch, dried curds called arul, tougher than shoe leather, sour enough to wake the dead, and beloved by Mongol riders. You chew one for a few minutes and try not to break a tooth. One bite in, and you suddenly miss that fermented milk from earlier. As noon approaches, the sun climbs higher, and your shadow shrinks to a blur beneath you. You squint at the horizon, hoping to glimpse the next station. Nothing yet. Just grass, wind, and more grass. But you know it's there. The yam never lets you down unless, of course, you're already lost. But let's not think about that. You press your heels lightly and the horse surges forward. Somewhere ahead, your next stop waits. Another station, another mount, another bowl of airag that may or may not have been fermented a little too long, but that's the yam. That's your life now. And whether it's a letter from a khan or a shopping list for the governor's wife, you'll get it there. You always do. The grass gets shorter here, drier, paler. Your horse's hooves thud against harder earth now, the ground turning dusty under the weight of centuries. You're moving into the more arid zones of the steppe. No trees, barely any shrubs, just low stubborn grasses clinging on like they've got something to prove. It's the kind of landscape where a shadow from a cloud feels like a gift. And in the distance you finally spot it, the next Urtaker. The station sits near a dried-up riverbed, its walls made of stone this time, not the usual wooden fencing or portable jars. You're far enough west that materials change depending on what's at hand. Sometimes you ride up to a station made entirely of packed mud. Other times it's logs and canvas, cobbled together like a nomad's IKEA set. This one looks older than the others, like it's been waiting centuries for someone to stop by. You slow your horse to a trot. Dust kicks up around you in little clouds. A small boy waves you in from the edge of the compound, holding a bucket of water like it's an Olympic torch. As you dismount, he points to a shaded corner where a trough sits. Your horse dives into it with the enthusiasm of someone who's been through too much. Inside the station, it's cooler. Stone walls make a difference. There's a low table with some barley bread, a scrap of dried mutton, and you guessed it, a bowl of airag that's frothy enough to be considered sentient. You chew slowly, trying not to taste it. At least it's not the salty cheese cubes one station served you that turned out to be reindeer milk mixed with horseradish. You try not to think about that day. A grizzled man with one eyebrow and half a mustache grunts in your direction. He's in charge here, probably been stationed in this stretch of nowhere for years. "Horse is lame," he says, gesturing to your latest steed. You nod. Yeah, you felt it too. The horse had been flagging, more than usual on that last stretch, and the little limp in its gait confirmed it. The station master scribbles something on a wooden tally board, then waves for the boy to lead in a replacement mount. This one is a beauty. Stocky, deep-chested, the color of old honey. Its mane has been half-braided, probably for luck. Mongol. Horses aren't bred for elegance. They're bred for endurance, strength, and the ability to nap standing up in a hailstorm. But this one has a spark in its eye that says, "Yes, I've seen things, and no, I won't be sharing." You saddle up and prepare for the next stretch, this one heading toward a larger administrative hub. The Yam had major nodes along the network, often near cities or fortresses. These were places where high-priority messages were sorted, where supplies were stockpiled, and where officials passed through like sand in the wind. You'd be arriving at one before sunset. As you ride, the road widens. Well, not a road exactly. There were no paved highways in most of the Yam, just worn paths, packed earth, and faint grooves etched by centuries of hooves and wheels. And yet riders like you could follow them even in a snowstorm, by instinct alone. You pass an old wooden marker, its script faded with age, probably left over from the days of Ogedei Khan. Historians still argue whether the Yam had formal signposts at all stations or just in the larger hubs. Some claim they were marked with imperial symbols, others say local customs shaped their appearance. Either way, they weren't flashy, just enough to let you know you were still on the path. Your thoughts drift. It's easy to do out here. The landscape rolls on without end, and the rhythm of hoofbeats becomes hypnotic. You start remembering things, a station where they gave you a boiled egg still in the shell, luxury. The time you fell asleep in the saddle and woke up 10 miles off course, that one courier who always wore bright red and claimed it scared wolves away, you'd laughed, until he actually scared a wolf off. And then you remember your paisa, the T. Paisa is your badge of authority, an oval or square tablet, usually made of gold, silver, or bronze engraved with the mark of the Great Khan. It tells every person you meet that you ride for the Empire and that you have the right to requisition supplies, food, and fresh horses. Show it to a village elder, and they'll fall over themselves bringing you millet cakes. Show it to a merchant caravan, and they'll scoot aside like river ice cracking in spring. But it's more than just a passport, it's also a burden. Lose it, and you'll spend the rest of your life explaining how you lost the most important object in the Empire. Misuse it, and well, Genghis Khan wasn't exactly known for his patience. You check your pouch, still there, cold metal against your fingertips, reassuring like a key to the Empire, or maybe a reminder that you're a cog in a very, very large wheel. The wind picks up again, carrying with it the scent of dust and sagebrush. You pass a herd of wild asses, called kulans, bolting across the plain in a thunder of hooves. Your horse flicks its ears but keeps going. Mongol horses are trained not to panic at movement. After all, when your job involves charging into unknown terrain at night with only the stars and your gut to guide you, panic is a luxury. The sun begins to droop, painting the sky in hazy oranges and dull purples. In the distance, you spot the next hub, a proper administrative center. Smoke rises from several chimneys, and you can already hear dogs barking. As you ride into the compound, a clerk approaches, brush in hand, ready to log your name and time. Of arrival. Courier from the Eastern Ridge, he asks. You nod. He notes it down, then gestures toward a long tent. You'll want to see the horses we got in last week. fresh from the 1Housr. You smile. The 1Housr is famous. Selective breeding, good grazing, and if the rumors are true, music therapy. The best horses in the empire come from those valleys, and tonight one of them will be yours. You dismount, hand over your paisa, and follow him in. Because in the Mongol, the horses didn't just matter, they were everything. You step into the long tent, the kind with thick felt walls and an earthy, almost comforting smell, like wool, horsehair, and toasted grass. Inside it's dimly lit by oil lamps, flickering shadows dancing across wooden partitions and rows of saddles hung with care. But the real stars of the show are waiting behind the far curtain. You hear them before you see them, deep, snuffling breaths, the occasional impatient stomp, a swish of a tail against a canvas wall. Then you step into the stall area, and there they are. The Orkhon herd, well, part of it. The real herd, grazing in the Orkhon Valley, sprawls over miles of mountainous steppe in central Mongolia, practically royal pasture. Only the best get picked for courier duty. These horses aren't just healthy, they're gleaming. Their coats shimmer like brushed suede, muscles taut under skin as if sculpted by a wind god with strong opinions on symmetry. Even their ears look alert enough to file a report. You feel slightly underdressed. A stablemaster greets you with the wary friendliness of someone who's cleaned up one too many mysterious saddle stains. "Choose wisely," she says. These beauties don't tolerate nonsense. You circle the candidates. One is clearly too twitchy, another too old. Then you see it, a dark bay, short-legged but broad-chested, with a quiet calm in its eye. Mongol horses are famously small by modern standards, more pony than stallion. But this one feels big, not in size, but in presence. You make eye contact. It doesn't blink. Perfect. Once outside, you saddle up and take a few cautious laps. Smooth. Gait, solid footing, no attitude. Your new mount is a keeper, and that's not just good luck, it's part of the system. Horses weren't randomly assigned. They were chosen with care. After all, the whole thing falls apart if the horse keels over halfway to Samarkand. That's why these postal steeds, often called Urtagamori, were groomed to perfection. Fared better, kept in better shelters. Some even had assigned grooms who knew their quirks and could predict if a hoof was about to go funny. One traveler, Marco Polo, yes, that Marco, was famously gobsmacked by how efficiently the Mongols handled their horses. He claimed they could change mounts faster than most knights could say armor chafes. Historians still debate how standardized the breeding was. Did the Mongols maintain formal bloodlines? Were certain herds reserved strictly for couriers, while others went to military or noble use? The records are vague, but archaeological digs in northern Mongolia suggest that horses did tend to be a little stockier and younger, typically between 4 and 8 years old. Prime age for endurance. And they weren't just raised strong, they were trained, not to gallop in circles or jump fences. This wasn't an equestrian pageant. No, these horses were taught how to navigate rivers, react to wolves, and most importantly, to swap riders with minimal fuss. Imagine being asleep, halfway through your bowl of fermented mare's milk, and suddenly a rider stumbles in at midnight needing a horse. That horse better not be shy. Your new steed passes the test. You feel its rhythm settle into yours as you ride out again, heading toward the evening horizon. The shadows stretch long and lean. The doesn't sleep, but you do. Or you try. Tonight, your station bunk is a blanket over a wooden plank, tucked beside a wall of saddlebags and an alarming number of flies. The fire crackles. You sip something warm and mildly unidentifiable. It tastes like it came from a yak that had emotional baggage, but it does the trick. As you settle in, you listen to the quiet hum of the station. It's a lullaby of logistics. Outside, a clerk records outbound riders with a tired brushstroke. Somewhere near the paddock, A groom sings to the horses in a low, tuneless hum. Mongols believed in soothing sounds, less to charm the animals and more to calm the humans around them. You once met a courier who swore his horse only ran full speed if he sang off-key. He had the voice of a strangled frog, but he always got there first. You drift, and when dawn comes, you're already halfway awake, dreams replaced by saddle soreness. Your next ride is a long stretch through the gravel. Plains. Fewer rivers now, more rocky outcrops and the occasional cluster of gazelles that scatter like gossiping villagers when you approach. But your new horse is steady, strong, the kind of ride that makes you forget just how far you've gone. Hours pass. You start reciting old poems to yourself, half-remembered verses from a Persian merchant, something about the moon being a pale shepherd watching over camels. Your horse flicks an ear unimpressed. You come across another courier mid-route, his horse limping, his paisa hanging askew like he's lost an argument with a bush. You slow, offer a nod, and trade a strip of dried cheese for a warning about flooded crossings ahead. That's the quiet magic of the yam. You're all out here alone, and yet not. The network ties you together like strands in a web. At any given moment, hundreds of you are riding, north to the Great Wall, west to the Caspian Sea, south to the jade palaces of China. You'll never meet most of them, but you're all moving with the same purpose. You are the empire's breath, and the horses, they're its heartbeat. So when your current steed finally slows, breathing hard, flanks heaving, you don't push it. You dismount gently, pat its damp neck. It gave everything it had. At the next station, the groom greets you with a grin and a spare apple for the horse. You hand off your saddlebag, stretch your sore legs, and look around for the next mount. And, sure enough, there's another beauty waiting. Not Orcan bred this time, but tall grey with ears that tilt, like it's already eavesdropping on your plans. Good. Because you've got 3 more stations to go before midnight. And this empire doesn't gallop itself. The morning is chillier now, colder than you expected for this time of year. Your breath curls into soft clouds as you mount the grey horse, who snorts once and then begins trotting as if he's already memorized the day's schedule. There's no rush in his movements, but no hesitation either. Just that quiet, competent energy you've learned to trust, more than a well-cooked dumpling. The road takes you into hilly terrain. Not mountains exactly, but jagged, wind-smoothed. Hills with crumbling rock faces and hidden springs. The vegetation changes again. Patches of sage, the occasional scraggly pine, and strange purple flowers that smell like burnt sugar. You don't know the name of those plants, and neither does anyone else you've asked. They're just flowers, one station keeper said, in the tone of someone who didn't feel like expanding on botany at 3 in the morning. Your path today skirts the edge of an old battle site, long overgrown and eerily quiet. No markers. Here just a small rise where bones are said to surface after heavy rains. You glance at it as you pass. Your horse doesn't blink. Mongol horses probably dream of past battles. They're bred from warriors' mounts, after all. This area, according to one half-sane clerk you once shared a tent with, was where a postal rider once outran a band of rebel scouts by switching horses 3 times in a single day, across 3 separate yam stations, before diving into a river and floating downstream holding onto his saddle. You believe him, mostly, because the yam wasn't just a series of evenly spaced relay points. It was flexible, fluid, smart. The Mongols built it not just as a road but as a living system. Station keepers learned to adapt to changing conditions, storms, rebellions, even the occasional herd of migrating marmots that blocked a path for a solid 2 days. Messages didn't just follow fixed lines, they moved like water, rerouted across backup trails when needed. Historians still argue whether the yam followed a master map or a looser patchwork of local routes. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Some roads were ancient trade paths, used long before the Khans rose. Others were hacked into the steppe like veins in stone, made new just for this empire. The result? A network that could carry a message from Karakorum to Baghdad in a matter of weeks. To do that, it had to be fast, but also robust. Which brings you to today's task. Not just another letter, but a double-sealed dispatch, marked with the crest of the Kagan himself. That means priority. You don't know what's in it. None of you are supposed to, but the added weight of the seal feels like it hums through your saddlebag. The last rider looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. He passed it off to you with trembling fingers and a warning. No shortcuts through the marsh, which is naturally exactly where you're headed. The marsh isn't on most maps. It sits like a wet blister between 2 ridges, filled with reeds. Mosquitoes the size of sparrows and mud that likes to hold on to boots longer than socially appropriate. But it is shorter, and your horse is sure-footed. Besides, the regular path is blocked by flooding again. You steer toward the cattails, letting your horse pick its footing. The ground squelches beneath you, but you keep moving, slowly, steadily. That's when the frogs start singing. At first it's just a few low croaks. Then the whole marsh joins in, like a choir warming up for a concert of aggressively mediocre love songs. It's absurd. It's loud. It's oddly comforting. Your horse doesn't flinch. He even flicks his tail in rhythm. You press on, ducking, under low branches, dodging dragonflies, and narrowly avoiding what you hope is just a log floating by. One time a courier swore he'd seen a crocodile out here, imported, he said, by a mad botanist trying to establish a maritime garden. You're 90% sure that was a fever dream. Still, you're relieved when the marsh gives way to higher ground. You squelch out of the reeds, soaked up to your knees but still in one piece. Your horse shakes itself like a dog. You both smell like a wet goat now. Congratulations. The next station appears as a low set of wooden buildings surrounded by a stone fence. There's smoke rising from a chimney, and somewhere nearby a rooster is having a very public existential crisis. As you approach, a pair of boys run out, one holding a brush, the other a bowl of salted barley. You dismount, hand off the reins, and immediately stretch your legs. Your thighs thank you. So does your lower back. But there's no time for lounging. The clerk is already waving you over. He inspects your seal, nods. You'll want to change horses again, he says. This one's got some fire in him. Comes from the West herd. Bit unpredictable. You glance at the new horse. It's a tall roan with a chipped ear and the expression of someone who's definitely started a bar fight or two. You approach. Slowly, it doesn't bite you. Good start. As you saddle up again, the clerk hands you a small pouch. For the road, he says. Inside, a sweet cake made of millet and honey, a courier's luxury. You take a bite. It crumbles like sunshine in your mouth. You nod in thanks, kick gently, and ride out again. Ahead lies open steppe, and then the river crossing. Your map, scratched into leather, shows the old bridge still standing. But with the rains lately, you're not counting on it. One way or another, the message is getting through, because that's what you do. You ride through marsh and mountain, sun and ice, with the best horses the Empire can offer, and just enough snacks to keep going. The road is now little more than a suggestion. Some flattened grass here, a few carved stones there, and the occasional pile of very suspiciously stacked dung that might be a landmark if you're feeling optimistic. You're high on the central steppe again, riding the roan with the chip in his ear, and he's starting to live up to his reputation. Every shadow makes him twitch. Every rabbit makes him reconsider his life choices. Still, he's fast. Really fast. And sometimes that's all you need. You're galloping across country that feels like it hasn't changed in centuries. No fences, no signs, just open space and wind that smells like distance. The sun is starting to lower behind you, stretching your shadow until it looks like a long-legged insect dancing along the grass. You spot a family of herders in the distance, white felt gear, small herd of sheep, one kid waving a long stick in. What appears to be either joy or very bad swordsmanship. As you ride past, they raise their hands and you nod. No words exchanged. You don't stop. You're still carrying the sealed message, and besides, you've got a schedule tighter than a merchant's purse. But something catches your eye. Behind the jeer, tied to a post, is a white horse. Not just any white horse. An absolute stunner. Slender build, thick mane, intelligent eyes. You can tell from a glance it's a courier horse on rest or retirement, and it makes you think about something people don't talk about enough. The secret lives of these animals off the clock. See, Mongol postal horses didn't all get worked to death. Many were rotated out of the system and returned to local families. Some became breeding stock, others were gifted to honored couriers, and a lucky few, truly top-tier equine VIPs, were buried with honors. Yes, buried. The Mongols had a habit of honoring their best animals. Horses that served well in the yam might be given a stone marker, or even a song composed by a local bard. That bard might have also been the baker, stable hand, or reluctant goat midwife. Jobs were fluid. Historians still argue whether this reverence was universal or reserved for elite breeds. But one thing's clear. Mongols didn't just ride their horses, they lived with them. They were companions, colleagues, and occasionally therapists, especially on lonely night rides when you needed to vent about saddle rashes. You keep riding, the road turning downward now toward a river basin. You feel the air shift, heavier, wetter with the scent of water and reeds. Birds start to appear overhead. Storks maybe, or cranes, you're never sure, but they move like old souls in slow motion. You reach the river just as dusk is starting to bloom. And there it is. The bridge. Sort. It's less a bridge and more an optimistic collection of timbers, having an existential crisis. The main support beam is cracked. One side has completely sunk into the mud, and a family of ducks appears to have claimed squatters' rights on the remaining planks. You dismount, inspect it, and sigh the sigh of someone who's seen this movie before. Your options. Take your chances crossing slowly, detour upstream to the fording point, adds 2 hours, or hope your horse has secret aquatic skills. The roan snorts like he's voting no on that last one. You decide on option 1. Walk. It's step by cautious step. You remove the saddlebag with the sealed message and sling it across your chest. If the horse falls in, you'll be heartbroken, but the message must survive. That's the job. Halfway across, the planks groan. The roan stares at you like this was not in his job description. You hum a tune, something quiet and silly about a yak who lost his hat, and keep walking. Somehow, miraculously, you make it across. You both stand on the far bank, wet only up to the knees, and the roan flicks his tail with the pride of a horse, who now thinks he's amphibious. You remount and keep riding, soaking but upright, the last light of day stretching into a surreal purplish haze. It's in this quiet, muddy twilight that you pass another courier going the other way. She's older, wrapped in layers of wool, her face half hidden beneath a hood. Her horse is the color of sand and moves with the ease of experience. You trade nods, nothing more, but there's an understanding between you. You both carry stories, even if you never hear them. At the next station, a modest outpost half hidden behind a ring of juniper trees, you get lucky. A fire already crackles in the main hut, and a pot of something soupy bubbles gently beside it. A smell of meat, roots, and too much garlic wafts out. Heaven. The station master is an old man with a permanent squint and a wool cap pulled down over his ears. He doesn't ask questions, just gestures toward a dry corner and offers you a ladle. You sit, you eat, you stretch your legs beside the fire. Then he says, "You're headed west." You nod. He pulls out a little carved totem, a small horse figure. "Take this," he says. "The next pass has wolves, you take it. You don't ask if it works, you don't ask how many riders made it past without it. You just tie it to your belt and finish your soup, because the yam may be mighty, and your horses may be the best fed and most trusted steeds on the steppe. But out here between stations, anything can happen. You sleep on a straw mat beside the fire that night. Your dreams are of hoofbeats and reeds, of singing frogs, of white horses and bridges held together by collective delusion. And when you wake, before the sun is even up, your next mount is already waiting. She's smaller, dappled, looks like she's half asleep herself. Perfect, because you're going to need every bit of calm you can muster for the mountain road ahead. You ride out into morning fog so thick it swallows your horse's ears. The world feels muffled, like someone wrapped the sky in wool. Your breath hangs in front of you, the only proof you're still moving forward. Somewhere to your left, a bird calls out, a single note like a flute testing its first breath. Your new mount, the dappled one, walks calmly, as if she knows the route even with her eyes closed. That's good, because you're heading into the foothills now. The terrain tilts upward slowly at first. Grass gives way to rock, rock gives way to loose gravel, and the wind sharpens until it feels like it's trying to write messages on your cheeks. You wrap your scarf tighter and lean forward in the saddle, your fingers cold enough to feel like they're borrowed. The road here is less used. You've switched to a secondary route, a backup trail meant for when the main artery gets snowed in. It winds through a shallow gorge dotted with pine trees and old shrines. The shrines are small, just stacked stones and the occasional painted plank, and usually offer nothing more than the whiff of smoke and a single feather tied to a twig. But they mark the path, and when you're this far from anything familiar, even a bundle of sticks becomes a lighthouse. According to one of the younger clerks back at the station, this pass was once home to a group of mountain hermits who offered weather predictions in exchange for cheese. The story goes that one of them predicted the fall of a local governor's marriage by observing goat patterns. The governor didn't take it well, and the hermits relocated. Historians still argue whether these mountain oracles were genuinely part of the yam system, or just opportunistic monks with a fondness for dairy. But either way, their weather reports were surprisingly accurate, and many couriers passed through here with a chunk of goat cheese in their satchel, just in case. The path narrows, steep drop on your right. Your horse hugs the inner curve. Her hooves carefully clicking against the stone. Below, mist curls between pines like sleepy ghosts looking for their morning coffee. You start to hear the bells before you see them, soft, irregular chimes carried on the wind. Then they emerge. First, one, then two. Then a whole line of shaggy yaks trudging slowly up the opposite trail, their backs heavy with bundles wrapped in red cloth. Their herders follow, short figures with long poles and longer beards. One of them waves. You wave back, feeling like travelers passing in a dream, and then they're gone, swallowed by the fog behind you. This high up, the yam relied on animals beyond horses. In rugged mountain regions, couriers occasionally used camels, mules, or even yaks to transport goods. Letters? Always on horseback. But packages, maps, imperial gifts, those might be carried by slower, sturdier animals that could survive cold and altitude with stubborn aplomb, and you can see why. The air's thinner now. Your breath shortens. Your horse slows, each step measured. You spot ice on the shaded rocks and a ribbon of snow trailing along the top ridgeline. You press on, reaching the narrowest section, barely wide enough for one horse. Below, a river gleams like a silver thread. You remember what the old station master said. Wolves. You pause, listening. Nothing. Then, there. A faint rustle. A stone tumbling somewhere higher up. Your horse stiffens. You don't panic. You've done this before. You reach slowly into your pack and pull out the little wooden totem, rubbing its smooth edges between your thumb and finger. It's probably nonsense, but when you tie it to your saddle horn, your horse visibly relaxes. Superstition or not, that's a win. You start moving again, quietly. A shadow moves between trees. Then another, but they don't follow. Just watch. Wolves rarely attack riders unless they're desperate, and you're moving with confidence, your scent masked by the sweat of a dozen horses you've ridden in the last few days. They smell confusion, not a challenge. At the summit, the wind opens up with a grand sweep of sound. The clouds part for just a moment, and you can see for miles, valleys, rivers, more mountains beyond. The empire laid out like a quilt, each patch a different story. And you realize again how vast it all is, how improbable this network is, and yet how it works, because of you. And horses like this one, and the men and women waiting at stations you haven't even seen yet. You descend into pine forests, the air warming slightly as you lose altitude. The trail widens again, and you exhale, shoulders finally relaxing. Your horse picks up speed, sensing the end of the pass. At the next outpost, tucked beside a stream and half hidden under mossy trees, you're greeted by a young girl chewing on a piece of bark. She points toward the barn. "Your ride's in the pen," she says, then wanders off singing a song about fish with bad manners. Inside the barn waits your next horse, a bay mare with white socks and a quiet dignity. The kind of horse who's seen some things and isn't impressed anymore. You pat the dappled one goodbye, whisper a thank you, and switch mounts. Another bowl of soup, another ladle of water, and a quick check of your dispatch. The seal still. Firm, the leather still dry. The station keeper, a wiry woman with 2 braids and a voice like gravel, hands you a wool cloak. "Wind's picking up east of here," she says. "You'll want this." You nod, take it, and ride out. The sky has darkened again, the clouds heavy and low. But the trail is good here, flat, wide, well-traveled. You make time, and as night begins to settle in, you spot the faint glimmer of another outpost fire in the distance, like a star fallen to earth just for you. You ride toward it, always forward, because the yam never sleeps. And neither, it seems, do you. The outpost fire turns out to be more of a controlled flicker than a roaring blaze. Just a modest little beacon, doing its best in a clay hearth outside a crooked wooden hut. Still, after mountain passes, wolves, and conversations with girls who chew bark recreationally, you'll take it. The postkeeper here is a man who doesn't look up when you arrive. He's carving a spoon from a chunk of horn and mutters something that might be a greeting or just his opinion of your timing. His dog, a shaggy creature with 3 legs and 1 eye, watches you with the suspicion of someone who's seen things. You dismount. Your bay mare snorts, clearly done with the day. You give her a long rub-down, check her hooves, and lead her to the low-walled stable, where she joins 2 other courier's horses munching from an impressively well-stocked trough. The yam didn't mess around when it came to nutrition. Oats, fermented barley, dried grass bundled like presents. These horses ate better than most soldiers. That was by design. The Mongol Empire prioritized its courier horses with an obsession bordering on religious. When a horse joined the yam, its diet was regulated, its breeding potential assessed, and its workload carefully monitored. Good horses were rotated, not worn out. Exceptional horses were tracked, sometimes more closely than their riders. You sit by the fire and sip a ladle of sour mare's milk left over from someone's breakfast. It tastes like carbonated yogurt and regret, but it warms your belly. The station dog finally decides you're not a threat and settles beside you, snoring like a small thundercloud. There's no formal bed here, just a pile of hides in a corner with less draft than the rest. You fold yourself in, cloak and all, the seal pouch tucked under your arm. You're asleep within minutes. You wake up before dawn. Again. You've lost track of how many days you've been riding. The air smells different again, warmer, dustier, with a faint tang of something citrusy you can't place. The terrain has shifted. Gone are the dense forests and alpine winds. Now the land stretches wide and low, a dry plain scattered with thornbrush, jackrabbits, and stone markers so weathered they look like molars sticking out of the earth. You're entering the desert belt. This is the part of the yam route where dreams get sunburned, but your new horse doesn't seem to mind. She's a dark chestnut with long legs and eyes like polished amber. You mount up and let her find her pace, an easy floating trot that eats distance like it's a hobby. The sun climbs quickly. The ground reflects heat in visible shimmers. You pull your scarf higher, squinting under your felt cap. This is the edge of the Gobi, one of the great AO zones of the Mongol network. Mail still went through, but the couriers had to be tough, clever, and just a little bit dehydrated at all times. To help, desert stations stored water in buried ceramic jars sealed with wax and hidden beneath stone cairns. Riders were trained to recognize the signs, an odd placement of rocks or a mark carved into a nearby boulder. The yam didn't just rely on muscle, it relied on collective memory. You pass one such cairn around midday. You've still got water, but you check it. Anyway, you uncover the jar, take a quick swig, stale but clean, then seal it back and rebuild the stones with care. This was another rule of the road. Never leave the next courier dry. Mongol couriers weren't saints, but there was a code. Unspoken, firm. You helped others survive because you might be the others tomorrow. The terrain changes again. Low hills rise like sleeping camels, and the earth turns redder. You spot the ruins of a way station long since abandoned, charred timbers, a half-buried fire pit, and the remnants of a wooden wheel. Probably burned in a raid or just claimed by time. But you stop anyway. There's an old ritual among some yam riders. You leave something behind at ruined posts. A pebble, a coin, a tuft of horsehair. It's a nod to those who didn't finish. The ride. You tie a single strand from your horse's tail to a piece of thornbrush and move on. Historians still argue whether this ritual was widespread or just a regional quirk. So either way, it persists in courier stories, passed down with a reverence usually reserved for saints or stubborn uncles. By late afternoon, you start to see signs of life again. Goat herds, tiny roadside shrines painted with ochre, the occasional flash of copper from a traveling merchant's mirror, and finally, blessedly, a real station. This one's a bit of a palace by yam standards. Stone walls, a proper gate, even a little market outside with a boy selling dried fruit on a mat. You toss him a coin, grab a handful of something chewy and apricot adjacent, and step inside. You're greeted by the assistant keeper, a slim man, with ink-stained hands and the kind of calm that only comes from spending most of your life cataloguing saddlebags. He leads you to a back room where you're offered not just food, but a proper bath. A bath. The water is warm. There's a hint of mint in it, probably from a local herb. You sink in, close your eyes, and let your muscles remember what they were like before the saddle became part of your skeleton. Afterward, you sit wrapped in linen while your next mount is prepped. The assistant hands you a wax tablet. Note. From HQ, he says. You scratch your head and read it. A simple message. Delay expected on the western route. Flash flood. Detour advised. Take Ridge Trail 27A, you sigh. 27A is a notorious route. Shorter, yes, but steeper, rockier, and prone to sudden goat interference. You nibble another piece of dried fruit and accept your fate. You saddle up. Outside, the sun is a molten disk edging toward the horizon. Your new horse, a speckled grey, tosses his head impatiently. You mount and whisper the same thing you always do. It's just one more leg. You ride out of the station and back into the vastness. The wind rises behind you, and the yam rolls on. The ridge trail begins with a rocky climb that scrapes at your boots and challenges your horse's sure-footedness. Every step is careful, deliberate. There's no room for a misstep. When the cliffs fall away so abruptly on either side, you can almost hear the wind whisper warnings. You lean into your mount, feeling the muscles shift beneath you, taut and practiced. This horse knows the dance. Her hooves find holds that your eyes miss, and you trust her completely. Together, you move slowly up the ridge, a ribbon of determination stretching into the sky. The air is cooler here, tinged with pine and the faintest trace of snow, even though it's midsummer. Somewhere ahead, a raven calls, a harsh, guttural sound that cuts through the stillness like a jester's laugh. You remember a story a fellow courier once told about ravens on this trail, how they were thought to be the eyes of the empire itself, watching and warning. Whether that's true or just a courier's superstition is a debate historians keep revisiting. Some argue the ravens were just scavengers, others insist they were sacred messengers. Either way, their cries echo in your mind as you climb higher. Midway up the ridge, you come across a narrow ledge barely wide enough for one horse. A low wooden railing, probably placed centuries ago by desperate hands, offers a little security. You steady yourself, focusing on the rhythm of your horse's breath and the crunch of gravel beneath her feet. Halfway across, you spot something unexpected. A carved stone marker, half buried in moss but still bearing faded inscriptions. It's a milestone, one of the original markers set up by the Yam's earliest administrators. These stones were more than just waypoints. They were proof of the empire's reach, reminders that even the remotest mountain ridge was part of a grand network. You dismount to study it, brushing away centuries of dirt. The inscription is worn but legible, a number indicating the distance to the next major station alongside a stylized horse emblem. Here it feels like a handshake across time. Pocketing a small chip of stone as a keepsake, a habit you've picked up much to the amusement of station clerks, you remount and press on. The trail steepens again, and you reach a clearing where wildflowers cling stubbornly to cracks in the rock. The sun breaks through the clouds, casting a soft light that makes the whole scene shimmer. You take a breath, letting the quiet wash over you. Suddenly, the sound of hooves clattering echoes behind you. Another rider appears, dust kicking up in their wake. They slow as they near. A young courier with a grin that says they've just survived something interesting. "Goat trouble," they announce, panting. You laugh softly, already imagining the scene, a stubborn herd blocking the path, the frustrated courier trying to herd them with nothing but voice and gesture. It's a story as old as the Yam itself, the occasional pastoral obstacle that reminds even the swiftest riders they aren't always in control. You swap brief news, share a sip of water, and part ways again, each disappearing into the vastness. In opposite directions, the ridge trail finally drops sharply, leading you down through a forest of twisted junipers. The scent of pine needles and earth fills your lungs, grounding you after hours of dizzying heights. Ahead, smoke curls lazily from chimneys, a sign of the next station. You ease your horse into a trot, anticipation easing the tension in your muscles. The station lies nestled in a small valley, surrounded by orchards and gardens that look like tiny bursts of civilization against the wilderness. Couriers here are rumored to have the best fresh fruits, a luxury on these routes, and you make a mental note to try the local plum wine if you get the chance. Inside the station's courtyard, you find a group of riders gathered, swapping stories and sharing news from distant posts. Their laughter is quiet, the kind that comes after long days and shared hardships. You join them, feeling the warm camaraderie settle in like a comfortable blanket. As night falls, lanterns flicker, casting dancing shadows on wooden walls. The scent of roasted meat and fresh bread drifts through the air, mingling with the crisp mountain breeze. You lean back, eyes heavy but alert, and realize once more why the yam horses were so prized. Not just for speed, but for endurance, loyalty, and the quiet understanding that they were part of something much bigger than any one rider. Historians still argue whether the success of the Mongol postal system was due more to its horses, its riders, or the meticulous infrastructure supporting them. But sitting here, surrounded by firelight and distant stars, you know it was all of these, woven together like the threads of a well-crafted saddle. You close your eyes, the night sounds wrapping around you like a lullaby. You wake to a chill in the air, the kind that creeps beneath your cloak and wakes the muscles you thought were resting. Outside, the sky is a deep indigo slowly lightening to lavender, the first birds calling tentative greetings to the dawn. The horses in the stable stamp and whuffle, sensing morning's approach. You stretch and take a moment to appreciate the simplicity of this place, a wooden beam ceiling above you, the scent of hay and smoke lingering from last night's fire. No city noise, no clatter of carts, just the gentle breathing of animals and the soft rustle of riders preparing to leave. Before mounting, you wander out to the orchard. The trees are heavy with fruit, apples, cherries, and something you can't quite name, round and red with a thin, waxy skin. A station keeper offers you one with a smile, saying it's a local variety prized for its sweetness. You bite into it, juice trickling down your chin, and it's like tasting sunshine. It strikes you that food, especially fresh fruit, was a rare luxury along the yam. Horses were fed with care, but human riders often subsisted on dried meat, fermented mare's milk, and whatever they could carry. The contrast makes you appreciate these moments of abundance even more. You saddle your horse, feeling the familiar weight of the leather and the solid strength beneath you. Today's route will take you through rolling hills dotted with ancient burial mounds, silent witnesses to cultures long gone but not forgotten. As you ride, you notice strange shapes rising from the earth, low earthen mounds ringed with stones. These are the graves of the Khitan people, an empire that once rivaled the Mongols themselves. Historians still argue whether the Khitan influence lingered in Mongol postal practices or was completely overwritten. But the evidence of their craftsmanship is undeniable. You slow to a walk, taking in the intricate patterns carved into stone markers near the mounds. These carvings, a mix of animals and abstract symbols, seem almost to pulse with stories waiting to be told. Your horse snorts and shifts beneath you, reminding you to keep moving. The trail leads you into a small village where you're greeted by curious children with bright eyes and dusty faces. They offer you water and dried fruit with the kind of generosity that feels rare in the wider world. You hand out a few coins and ruffle their hair, thinking how many of them might one day become couriers themselves. After a brief rest, you mount again and head toward a river crossing. The water is cold and clear, tumbling over smooth stones. With a cheerful murmur, you pause, letting your horse drink while you wet your face and arms. This part of the yam was known for its clever water management. Stations often built small dams or channels to direct water to wells and troughs, an essential feature in an empire that stretched from frozen tundra to arid desert. You think about the couriers who came before you, riding through these varied landscapes with little more than a horse, a message, and sheer determination. Their success relied not just on speed, but on knowledge of the land, respect for resources, and a sense of shared purpose. The next stretch of your journey takes you over a series of low ridges, the grass soft beneath your horse's hooves. You spot a herder in the distance, tending a flock of sheep that graze lazily under the afternoon sun. You wave, and he nods back, eyes squinting against the light. As evening falls, you arrive at a station nestled among birch trees. The air smells of pine resin and drying hay. Inside, you find a small library of scrolls and maps, an unusual luxury for a yam outpost. A young clerk shows you the collection, explaining that this station served as a minor hub where routes converged and messages were compiled before dispatch. The meticulous records here remind you that the Mongol postal system was as much about administration and planning as it was about endurance and speed. You settle down with a warm bowl of soup, the flavors mild but comforting. The day's journey weighs on your limbs, and as the fire crackles, you let your thoughts drift. It's clear the Mongol postal riders were more than messengers. They were guardians of connection, threads holding an empire together through vast distances and diverse cultures. And at the heart of it all, those incredible horses, steady, fast, and cherished. You drift to sleep thinking about the next leg of your journey, wondering what stories the road will whisper to you next. The morning light filters softly through the thin fabric of your tent, casting a warm glow over your weary limbs. You wake feeling the faint ache of yesterday's climb, but also a quiet satisfaction. Today's ride will take you through the heartland, vast steppes where the grass waves like an endless sea, and the horizon stretches out to infinity. You mount your horse, feeling her muscles flex beneath you, as if she senses the importance of this leg. The riders here swear the horses raised in the steppe itself have an almost mystical endurance, able to cover incredible distances with little rest or food. This is the breed favored by the Mongol couriers, and you understand why. The wind carries a faint scent of wildflowers and freshly turned earth. You breathe it in deeply, the kind of smell that seems to promise adventure and quiet moments all at once. The trail is wide and flat, a welcome change from yesterday's cliffs and river crossings. You let your horse find a steady gait, a rhythmic pounding that lulls your mind into a gentle trance. As you ride, you notice the subtle changes in vegetation, clumps of wild onions, patches of sage, and distant groves of willow. The landscape is dotted with yurts, their smoke curling upward like lazy serpents. You pass a small group of nomads, their faces weathered by sun and wind, who offer a greeting and a piece of dried meat. Their kindness is typical of these lands, where hospitality is both tradition and necessity. You think about the role of these nomadic communities in the Mongol postal system. Their intimate knowledge of the terrain, weather patterns, and local wildlife was invaluable. Historians still debate whether the yam could have succeeded without their crucial support. Further along the trail, you come across a curious sight. A cluster of carved stones arranged in a circle, each etched with runes and symbols you don't recognize. Locals tell stories of these as spirit markers, meant to protect travelers and horses alike. You run a hand over one of the stones, feeling the rough grooves beneath your fingers. It's a reminder that the journey was never just physical. It carried a spiritual weight too. Your horse suddenly snorts, alert to a distant movement. You peer into the haze and see a herd of wild horses galloping across the plain, manes flying in the wind. It's a breathtaking sight, and you feel a pang of longing. To be truly free, to run without bounds, that's the dream of every rider, and horse alike. You press onward, the sun dipping low and painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The next station is visible on the horizon, a cluster of wooden buildings surrounded by fences and a scattering of horses tied to posts. Inside, the keeper welcomes you with a grin and offers a steaming bowl of millet porridge. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth and simplicity. The horses here receive special care. Some have thick winter coats already starting to grow, a sign of the approaching cold season. You marvel at how these animals adapt to such extremes, whether scorched desert days or icy mountain nights. As night settles, you lie under the stars, the vastness of the steppe stretching overhead. The silence is profound, broken only by the distant neighing of horses and the occasional hoot of an owl. You think about the Mongol couriers who rode this land centuries ago, relying on their horses not just for speed, but for survival and connection. In this endless sea of grass, their system was a lifeline, and your horse, steady and true, is your anchor to that legacy. The chill of dawn bites gently as you stir awake, the air inside the yurt still thick with the scent of smoldering herbs. You dress quietly, not wanting to disturb the few other riders who are already preparing to depart. The low murmur of a morning prayer rises softly, a tradition carried through generations of couriers. Mounting your horse, you feel the first light warming your back as you step onto the frost-tinged grass. Today's route takes you toward the southern forests, a place where the dense trees hide secrets and old legends whispered among the couriers. As you move deeper into the woods, the canopy thickens, dappling sunlight scattering like liquid gold. The forest floor smells rich, moss, damp earth, and the faint aroma of pine resin. Your horse moves cautiously, ears twitching at every distant crack and rustle. You pass ancient groves where gnarled oaks and cedars stand sentinel. Locals believe these trees house spirits that guide travelers safely through the shadows. Historians still argue whether these beliefs influenced Mongol postal practices or if they were simply practical respect for the environment. In a quiet clearing, you spot the remains of an old watchtower, its wooden beams long rotted but still standing stubbornly against time. It served as a lookout post for riders, warning of approaching threats, wolves, bandits, or worse. The tower's stones are covered in lichens and faint inscriptions that hint at forgotten languages. Suddenly your horse shies slightly. You look up to see a flash of movement, a family of deer bounding away, white tails flicking like flags. The moment is brief but grounding, reminding you that this wild place pulses with life beyond the endless logistics of the yam. Further along, you reach a small stream babbling over smooth stones. You pause to let your horse drink, watching the water catch the light in quicksilver flashes. Nearby you spot carefully stacked piles of stones, markers left by previous travelers to signal safe crossings or warnings. You think about how every inch of this route was carefully maintained and mapped, a testament to the Empire's remarkable organization. Yet the terrain is never quite tamed. It retains its wildness and mystery. The day wears on, and you arrive at a station nestled between towering trees. Inside, you find a group of couriers sharing stories over warm tea brewed from local herbs. One rider shows you a curious map, drawn on animal hide, detailing secret routes known only to the most trusted messengers. They tell you about the silent horses, legendary mounts said to move without sound, slipping through forests like ghosts. Whether these were real breeds or mythic exaggerations is a topic still debated by scholars. You sip your tea slowly, letting the quiet warmth seep into your bones. The forest around you seems to hold its breath, waiting for night to cloak its secrets once more. As you prepare to rest, you reflect on how the yam wasn't just a network of stations and horses. It was a web of stories, myths, and lives intertwined across the vast Mongol world, and you riding beneath ancient trees are part of that ongoing tale. The sun rises pale and hesitant as you leave the forest behind, stepping onto rolling plains, where the grass whispers softly in the breeze. The air carries the faint scent of dry earth and distant wildflowers, a soothing balm after the dense woods. Your horse moves steadily, hooves brushing through the tall grass that sways like waves on a gentle sea. There's a calm rhythm here, broken only by the occasional call of a lark or the distant bark of a herding dog. You reflect on the way this part of the route was different, less about speed, more about endurance and patience. The Mongol couriers knew that some messages needed careful tending, not just a mad dash. Along the way, you pass a herd of cattle tended by nomads, their figures draped in colorful cloaks that ripple in the wind. One of them offers a nod and a handful of dried cheese, a simple gift exchanged with the unspoken understanding of shared respect. You tuck the cheese into your pouch, thinking about how food was a currency of kindness along the Yam. Riders often carried small rations, but fresh provisions were precious and highly valued. Further ahead, you spot a cluster of stone huts, remnants of an ancient settlement long abandoned. The walls are crumbling, overtaken by creeping vines and wildflowers. It's a silent testament to lives once lived, routines once followed. Historians still argue whether these settlements were connected to early postal routes or simply waypoints for travelers, but their presence adds a layer of mystery to the landscape. You dismount to explore, running your hand along a carved lintel, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The patterns are unfamiliar but beautiful, intricate swirls that seem almost hypnotic in the soft afternoon light. Returning to your horse, you notice a small scar on her flank. An old injury, perhaps from a skirmish or a fall. You pause to gently run your fingers over it, a quiet acknowledgement of the hardships these animals endured in service. The afternoon stretches lazily as you continue, the sun dipping lower and casting long shadows. You reach a small river, its waters calm and clear. You pause here, letting your horse drink deeply while you cup water in your hands, feeling the cold seep through your fingers. Nearby, a fishing trap set by villagers catches your eye. It's simple yet ingenious, woven reeds forming a funnel to guide fish into a holding pool. A small but vital invention, part of the everyday ingenuity that kept these remote stations running. The day's journey ends at a station surrounded by fields, ready for harvest. The scent of ripening grain mingles with the soft hum of insects settling for the night. Inside, a group of riders shares a quiet meal, laughter low and easy. You join them, the warmth of companionship easing the weariness in your bones. As darkness falls, you lie beneath a sky dense with stars. The vastness humbles you, and you feel the quiet pulse of the empire that once stretched across these lands, held together by riders, horses, and stories like yours. You close your eyes, the gentle rhythm of your horse's breathing a lullaby against the night. The morning air is crisp, tinged with the faint scent of pine and something earthy, freshly turned soil maybe, or the lingering smoke of last night's fire. You stretch, feeling the familiar stiffness that comes from long hours in the saddle, and prepare for what promises to be a slower, reflective leg of your journey. Today you're riding along one of the empire's lesser-known routes, winding through valleys dotted with small villages and farmlands. The landscape is gentle, a patchwork of fields and orchards, with the occasional windmill turning lazily in the breeze. As you pass, children wave shyly, their faces bright with curiosity and the simple joy of seeing a traveler. You smile and tip your hat, feeling the warmth of their greetings wash over you. You stop briefly at a roadside market where traders gather to exchange goods, spices from the south, silks from the east, and dried fruits from the steppe. The air here is thick with the mingling scents of cinnamon, cumin, and fresh bread. A vendor offers you a sample of fermented mare's milk, known as airag, a traditional drink that's both tart and fizzy. You take a cautious sip and find it surprisingly refreshing, with a subtle sweetness beneath the tang. The yam's role in facilitating trade is clear. Messages weren't just military orders, but also vital communications about commerce, weather, and diplomacy. Historians still debate how much the postal system influenced the spread of goods and ideas, but it's undeniable that the network was a backbone of the empire's economy. Riding on, you come across an unusual sight, a small herd of yaks grazing alongside cattle, a reminder of the diverse cultures within the Mongol domains. The herders, wrapped in heavy woolen cloaks, watch you with mild amusement. You note the distinctive tack on your horse, a finely crafted saddle with soft leather, padding and high pommel, designed for long hours of riding. Such innovations made a huge difference to the courier's endurance. Further along, you encounter a narrow wooden bridge spanning a swift river. The boards creak under your horse's weight, and you feel a moment's hesitation, remembering stories of riders lost to collapsing crossings. Once across, the path climbs gently to a hilltop, overlooking a wide valley. The view is breathtaking, rolling hills fading into misty distance, the soft light of late afternoon casting everything in gold. You take a moment to breathe it all in, feeling a sense of connection to the countless riders who passed this way before you, each carrying messages that shaped history. As evening falls, you reach the next station, a cluster of yurts surrounded by flickering lanterns. Inside, the scent of roasted lamb mingles with sweet tea. You settle down among your fellow riders, the warmth of the fire and shared stories wrapping around you like a cozy blanket. Your horse stands quietly nearby, chewing on hay, her breath forming small clouds in the cooling air. You close your eyes, feeling the steady beat of hooves echo in your heart. The final leg of your journey begins under a sky brushed with the soft pinks and blues of early dawn. You rise slowly, the cool air carrying a faint promise of spring, and prepare your horse for the last stretch. The rhythm of the journey has become a quiet companion, each day's ride folding seamlessly into the next. Today's path leads you across a mosaic of open plains and rocky outcrops, where the wind carries the distant calls of birds and the faint rustle of grasses. The scent of warm earth and dry grass surrounds you, comforting and familiar. You notice the strength in your horse's steady gait, a testament to the careful breeding and tireless training that marked these prized animals. It's said that the Mongol postal horses were gifted the best care and the finest bloodlines, an investment in speed, endurance, and reliability. As you ride, you reflect on the system itself, how it transformed communication across one of history's largest empires, knitting together distant lands and diverse peoples. The Yam was more than just a postal route. It was a lifeline, a network that kept the empire's heart beating. At a small station, you pause to rest and share a simple meal of dried meat and flatbread with fellow riders. The quiet camaraderie reminds you that this was never a solitary venture but a shared mission, one woven through countless journeys like yours. You hear stories from older riders about legendary horses and riders, tales that blur the line between history and myth. One favorite is of a courier who outran a storm, riding so fast the thunder seemed to chase him but never catch up. Whether true or fanciful, these stories sustain the spirit of the Yam. As the sun dips lower, you approach your final destination, a sprawling encampment where messengers gather to pass on news and orders. The scene is alive with movement. Horses neigh softly, riders exchange nods, and the air hums with quiet purpose. You dismount, feeling the familiar ache and satisfaction of a journey completed. The knowledge that your horse, your steady companion, will rest well tonight fills you with gratitude. You lie back beneath the vast Mongol sky, stars beginning to twinkle faintly. The world feels wide and deep, full of stories whispered on the wind and carried on the backs of horses. Your breathing slows, matching the gentle pulse of the night. The journey ends, but the legacy rides on. The night deepens around you now, folding you gently into its quiet embrace. The world has slowed to a soft pulse, each breath becoming a little lighter, a little more peaceful. Your thoughts drift like clouds, soft and slow, carrying you away from the endless plains and ancient trails. Imagine the steady rhythm of hooves fading into a calm stillness, the warm breath of your horse beside you as the stars stretch wide overhead. The gentle breeze whispers secrets of a time long past, where every message carried was a thread in a vast tapestry woven across endless horizons. You are safe here, cradled by the quiet earth and the memory of countless riders who once journeyed beneath this same sky. Let their stories wrap around you like a soft blanket, soothing and steady. With each slow breath, Feel yourself sinking deeper into calmness, the last traces of the day melting away. The world is vast and mysterious, but here in this quiet moment, you are held in perfect peace. Now rest well and let dreams carry you forward on gentle wings.